Racist delivery driver refuses service to black family, shocked when they go viral. The sun was casting a warm glow over the quiet suburban neighborhood where Marcus and his family lived, bathing everything in a golden light that brought out the colors of the fall season. Trees with vibrant, amber leaves stood along the street, casting gentle shadows on the sidewalks. It was a crisp, fresh day, one of those perfect, almost nostalgic autumn afternoons that felt like they were made for relaxation and family gatherings. A soft breeze carried the comforting scent of freshly cut grass and distant wood smoke from someone's backyard barbecue. The neighborhood itself was alive, yet tranquil, with the rhythmic hum of a distant lawnmower blending seamlessly with children's laughter and the occasional bark of a dog. Birds chirped from branches, flitting back and forth, their playful calls adding an extra layer of serenity to the environment. Here, Marcus felt a profound sense of belonging and pride, as if this was exactly where he was meant to be. Today was special. Marcus could feel it as he stood in his driveway, unloading a few grocery bags from his car, a slight smile playing on his lips. The bags were filled with treats and snacks for a family gathering later in the afternoon, a tradition they held dear, one of those small but cherished moments where they could set aside the demands of the week and simply enjoy each other's company. But what really had him excited was a package he had been waiting for all week, something he had wanted for a long time and had finally decided to treat himself to. It was scheduled to arrive any minute now, adding an extra layer of anticipation to the day. Marcus's wife, Dana, joined him on the front porch, her warm smile matching his own as she helped him carry the bags inside. She wore a cozy sweater, her hair pulled back in a loose bun, a few strands escaping around her face. Dana was the heart of the family, always attentive and thoughtful, with a laugh that could brighten any room. She reached for one of the bags and playfully nudged Marcus. "So, still waiting on that package, huh?" she teased, knowing full well how much he'd been looking forward to it. Marcus chuckled, nodding. "Yep. Any moment now. I keep checking the tracking and it says, out for delivery, but you know how that goes. It'll get here when it gets here." Dana smiled, shaking her head in amusement. "I swear, you're worse than the kids when you're excited about something. But I get it. You deserve this." As they carried the bags inside, Marcus's teenage son, Daniel, came bounding down the stairs, drawn by the sound of their conversation. He had that characteristic energy of a young teenager, his face lighting up at the sight of the snack bags. "Did you get the spicy chips, Dad?" Daniel asked, rifling through one of the bags with the enthusiasm only a hungry teenager could have. Marcus rolled his eyes, laughing. "Yes, I got your chips. Just don't finish them all before everyone gets here." Daniel grinned, holding up the bag of chips victoriously. No promises. The whole family was in a cheerful mood, looking forward to the gathering they'd planned. It was a small get-together, just a few relatives and friends, but for Marcus, these moments were precious. He knew that it wasn't the grand occasions that bonded a family but the small, quiet moments like these. Back outside, the street was calm, lined with cars parked neatly in front of each house. People went about their business. An elderly couple walked hand in hand down the sidewalk, and a young woman jogged past with her golden retriever trotting beside her. Neighbors waved and exchanged pleasantries, as was typical in their close-knit community. Marcus nodded back, a silent acknowledgement that said more than words ever could. It was one of those neighborhoods where everyone knew everyone, and Marcus cherished the sense of security and peace that came with it. The air was filled with an easy calm, yet Marcus's anticipation made everything seem heightened. He checked his phone again, tapping the tracking app out for delivery. It still read, and he couldn't help but chuckle at his own impatience. Dana was right. He felt like a kid waiting for Christmas morning. "I think I've checked this thing about 100 times already," he admitted to himself, putting the phone back in his pocket with a sheepish smile. A sense of pride swelled within him as he looked at his house, a modest but well-kept two-story with a neatly trimmed lawn and flowers planted along the walkway. It was the kind of house he'd always dreamed of owning, a place he felt proud to call home. The warm afternoon sun bathed the suburban neighborhood in a gentle, golden light, casting long shadows across the neatly trimmed lawns and quiet, winding streets. Birds chirped from their nests in tall trees lining the sidewalk, their melody mingling with the distant sound of children laughing and a lawnmower humming in the background. The soft, comforting sense of freshly cut grass and blooming flowers drifted through the air, creating an atmosphere of peace and familiarity. It was a day like any other in this community, quiet, orderly, the kind of place where neighbors waved to each other from their driveways and the occasional dog barked from a yard. Houses stood in a row, each unique but well-kept, displaying a mix of personality and pride. Each house had its own touches, a freshly painted door here, a potted plant by the steps there, and garden gnomes peeking out from flower beds. The scene was nearly idyllic, the kind of peaceful setting that gave one a sense of security and belonging. Marcus lived in one of these houses with his family. His home was modest but clearly cared for, with a lush green lawn and a row of bright flowers lining the pathway to the front door. Their home wasn't large or extravagant, but every inch of it radiated warmth and pride. Marcus had spent countless weekends with his family planting flowers, pruning bushes, and making sure the house looked its best. He loved his home and even more, loved the life he'd built within its walls. Today, Marcus had something special to look forward to, a long-awaited package. It was something he'd saved up for and planned for weeks, a gift to himself and his family, a small joy that would bring even more warmth to their home. He could barely contain his excitement, checking his phone periodically for updates on the delivery status. "It should be here any minute," he called to his wife, who was busy in the kitchen preparing a snack for their young son, Isaac. "Oh, Marcus, you're like a kid on Christmas," she teased, shaking her head with a smile. "I don't think I've seen you this excited since your last package delivery." They both laughed, sharing a warm moment. Marcus leaned against the counter, grinning. "Well, you know how much I've been looking forward to this," he said, glancing out the window as he heard a car approach. But it was just a neighbor pulling into their driveway, not the delivery van he was expecting. As the minutes ticked by, Marcus's anticipation only grew. He wandered out onto the front porch, the warmth of the sun on his face as he looked up and down the street. Everything about this day felt perfect, and he couldn't wait to share the moment with his family. It was then that he saw a delivery van turn onto his street. He recognized the vehicle immediately, noting the familiar logo on the side. His heart did a small leap of excitement. This was it. The van rumbled down the road, coming to a stop just outside his house, and Marcus could already imagine the moment he'd unbox his eagerly awaited package. His son, peeking from the window beside him, squealed with delight at the sight of the van. "Daddy, is it here?" Isaac exclaimed, bouncing with excitement. "Yes, buddy, I think this is it," Marcus replied, beaming at his son's enthusiasm. As Marcus prepared to walk down to meet the delivery driver, the van's door swung open, and out stepped a woman with a rigid posture and a sour expression. She wore the standard delivery uniform, though her clothes looked rumpled and slightly askew, as if she'd thrown them on without much care. Her hair was pulled back in a hasty ponytail, and there was a tired, almost irritated look on her face as she scanned the neighborhood. Karen, the delivery driver, was not a fan of this area. She found the quiet, orderly streets unsettling in a way she couldn't quite put into words. To her, everything here seemed overly polished, a facade of peace and happiness that felt unnatural. She didn't like making deliveries in neighborhoods like these. The pristine lawns and friendly smiles made her feel out of place, even defensive. As she stepped out of the van, her gaze swept over Marcus's house, taking in the manicured lawn, the vibrant flower bed, and the neatly painted front porch. A slight sneer formed on her lips as she muttered under her breath. "Another one of these houses," she grumbled, not caring if anyone heard her. She had developed a bias against places like this. Too nice, too clean, too well-kept. It irked her, though she couldn't explain why. Karen picked up the package from the passenger seat, glancing at the address label with a mixture of annoyance and resignation. She didn't recognize the name, but something about it sparked a preemptive judgment in her mind. Without realizing it, she'd already built a mental image of Marcus based on nothing more than his name and the look of his house. Her expression soured even more as she walked around the front of the van, clutching the package tightly as if it were a burden. Meanwhile, Marcus watched her approach, his initial excitement tempered slightly by the look on her face. He could sense that something about her demeanor was off. She seemed closed off, almost hostile, in a way that felt out of place in this friendly neighborhood. But he brushed it off, deciding to meet her with a smile and the warmth he was known for. "Good afternoon," he called out as she approached, his voice filled with genuine friendliness. Karen barely glanced at him, her eyes flickering over him briefly before returning to the package in her hands. She didn't return his smile, her face remaining a mask of disinterest. To her, Marcus was just another customer, another stop on a long list of addresses she had to deliver to before she could clock out. "Are you Marcus?" she asked in a flat, almost annoyed tone, holding the package out as if she couldn't wait to be rid of it. "Yes, that's me," he replied, extending his hand in a friendly gesture. "Thank you so much for bringing this. I've really been looking forward to it." But Karen didn't take his hand. She ignored the gesture entirely, focusing instead on the package in her hands. Her fingers tightened around the edges, and for a brief moment, she seemed reluctant to hand it over. Marcus noticed her hesitation but chose not to comment on it. Instead, he kept his hand out, waiting patiently, his expression still warm and open. Karen held the package out stiffly, her expression hardening as she finally met his eyes. There was something in her gaze, a flicker of disdain, perhaps, or a barely concealed prejudice, that Marcus picked up on immediately. It was subtle but unmistakable. Her eyes narrowed slightly, and she looked at him as though he were an inconvenience, something she'd rather not be dealing with. "Sign here," she said tersely, shoving an electronic pad toward him. Her voice was cold, and she made no attempt to hide her impatience. Marcus's smile faltered for a brief moment as he took the pad from her. He could sense the tension in her demeanor, the way she held herself with a rigid, almost defensive posture. But he maintained his composure, refusing to let her attitude affect his own. He'd encountered people like her before, individuals who seemed to carry an unspoken prejudice, a sense of superiority that colored every interaction. "Thank you," he said as he signed, handing the pad back to her. His voice was calm and respectful, even though he felt the sting of her dismissive attitude. Karen took the pad back without a word, her face a mask of indifference. She barely looked at him as she slipped the pad back into her bag, her movements quick and efficient, as if she couldn't wait to move on to her next delivery. There was a long, uncomfortable silence as she stood there, her eyes fixed on the ground, refusing to make eye contact. Marcus, sensing the awkwardness, decided to try lightening the mood. He'd always believed that a little kindness could go a long way, even in situations like this. "I hope the rest of your day goes smoothly," he said, his tone genuine and friendly. But Karen didn't respond with the warmth he'd hoped for. Instead, she let out a sharp, dismissive breath, her lips curling into a small, forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Yeah, well, that depends," she muttered under her breath, barely loud enough for him to hear. "Depends on whether people cooperate." Marcus felt a small pang of frustration, but he kept it to himself. He'd grown accustomed to moments like these, interactions that carried a subtle but undeniable undercurrent of judgment. It wasn't the first time he'd faced this kind of treatment, and he knew it wouldn't be the last. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting a warm glow over the neighborhood as Marcus continued his efforts to connect with Karen. He believed that open dialogue and understanding would eventually soften her heart. However, with each passing day, it became painfully clear that his optimism was met with increasing hostility from her. One Saturday morning, the community gathered at the park for a family day. Marcus and his family arrived early to set up, excited to foster connections within the neighborhood. Tanya set up the picnic table while their son played with a few other kids nearby. As Marcus unloaded the car, he spotted Karen approaching, her expression a mix of annoyance and disdain. "What do you think you're doing here?" Karen snapped, her arms crossed tightly against her chest. Marcus paused, taken aback by her sudden hostility. "We're setting up for the family day. We wanted to bring everyone together." "But, so you can take over this neighborhood," she scoffed, her eyes narrowing. "You think just because you're trying to make friends, you can change things around here? This isn't your home." Marcus felt his heart race. He had hoped for a peaceful gathering, not a confrontation. "I'm just trying to help build a sense of community. We all live here, and it's important for us to support one another." Karen stepped closer, her voice low but filled with venom. You don't belong here, Marcus. This is a neighborhood for hardworking people, not someone looking for a handout. Why don't you go back to where you came from? Her words struck like a blow, the implication of her racism hanging heavily in the air. Marcus stood frozen, grappling with the hostility directed at him. He took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. That's not true. Everyone deserves to be here, regardless of their background. We all have a right to call this place home. Karen rolled her eyes, dismissing his words as if they were nothing more than meaningless chatter. You think you can come in here and change things? You're delusional. People like you are ruining this place. Marcus felt a wave of anger wash over him. How could someone be so cruel? But he also recognized that reacting in anger wouldn't help the situation. I believe in kindness and respect for everyone. We can create a better community together. Karen sneered, stepping back as if his words had physically repulsed her. You're naive if you think that's going to work. I've seen your type come and go, thinking they can just swoop in and act like they own the place. With that, she turned on her heel and walked away, leaving Marcus to simmer in the anger and hurt of her words. He felt the weight of her entitlement crushing down on him, but he refused to let it deter him from his mission to build connections. In the weeks that followed, Karen's hostility escalated. She seemed to take every opportunity to undermine Marcus and his family. During community meetings, she would roll her eyes whenever he spoke, often muttering insults under her breath. At one gathering, she interrupted him mid-sentence, exclaiming, "You really think anyone cares what you have to say? Just stick to your own kind." The room fell silent, the shock of her outburst palpable. Marcus felt a mix of embarrassment and anger, but he knew he had to remain composed. Everyone deserves a voice here, Karen. We can all contribute to the conversation, he replied, striving to maintain a respectful tone. She merely laughed, a cruel sound that echoed through the room. You talk about inclusion and respect, but you're the one trying to push others out. You don't even know how to respect boundaries. Marcus's heart raced as he felt the room's tension grow. I'm not trying to push anyone out. I'm here to build bridges, not walls, he countered. Karen leaned forward, her voice dripping with contempt. You're just playing the victim card. This neighborhood has its own history, and you think you can just erase it with your happy little speeches? Despite the hurt that stung his heart, Marcus refused to back down. I'm not erasing anything. I'm asking for understanding and respect. We can learn from each other's histories. Learn from you? Karen spat. Why don't you try to learn how to stay in your lane instead of trying to lecture the rest of us? The confrontation left Marcus feeling isolated, the weight of her words heavy on his chest. As he glanced around, he could see that others were beginning to take notice of the escalating tensions. The turning point came during a neighborhood watch meeting. As residents gathered to discuss safety issues, Marcus felt the unease in the room as Karen entered, her presence a storm cloud that threatened to overshadow the meeting. I'm not here for your little community club, she announced, her voice dripping with sarcasm. But I do think it's time we talked about what's really happening around here. Let's focus on community safety, the meeting leader suggested, trying to maintain order. What are the main concerns? Karen raised her hand, a smirk spreading across her face. My main concern is that we have a bunch of people who don't belong here stirring up trouble. We need to protect our neighborhood from outsiders trying to take advantage of us. Marcus's stomach churned at her blatant attempt to incite division. That's not what this is about, Karen. We're all here for the same reason. To keep our neighborhood safe. Speak for yourself, she snapped. Some of us want to keep our families safe from, she paused, emphasizing her point, from those who don't belong here. Marcus felt a knot of frustration tighten in his chest. Your prejudice is showing. It's not just about us versus them. We're all neighbors, and we should be supporting each other, not tearing each other down. Karen leaned back in her chair, a look of satisfaction on her face as she crossed her arms defiantly. I'm just stating the facts. You can pretend all you want that you're some kind of savior, but I see through your little act. The meeting ended in chaos, with raised voices and heated arguments erupting. Marcus felt the crowd split, some siding with him and others drawn to Karen's venomous rhetoric. After that confrontation, Marcus hoped that things would eventually settle down, but Karen seemed determined to escalate her hostility. One afternoon, as he was shopping at the local grocery store, he unexpectedly ran into her in the produce aisle. "Look who it is," Karen sneered, picking up an apple and inspecting it with a feigned air of nonchalance. Shopping for fresh fruit? Or just trying to make a scene? Marcus felt his heart race as he tried to ignore her. "I'm just here for groceries," he replied curtly, not wanting to engage. Karen laughed, a sharp sound that caught the attention of nearby shoppers. "You really think anyone cares? You're just another one of those people trying to play the victim card. Why don't you go back to your own community and leave us alone?" He could feel the heat rising to his face, but he forced himself to remain calm. "This is a public place, Karen. I have every right to be here, just like you." She took a step closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You don't belong here. You think you're so special, but no one wants you around." At that moment, Marcus felt the weight of her words pressing down on him. He glanced around the aisle, catching the eyes of other shoppers who seemed to be listening in. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he replied, trying to maintain his composure. "I'm here to shop like everyone else." "Yeah, well, maybe you should think about what that really means. You're just taking up space that could be for someone more deserving," Karen shot back. Marcus could feel the anger bubbling beneath the surface, but he was determined not to give in to her taunts. "You don't know anything about me or my family. We deserve to be here just as much as anyone else." With that, he turned to walk away, but Karen wasn't finished. "You'll see, Marcus. You may think you can just come in here and be accepted, but this isn't your home. You'll always be an outsider." The last straw came during a community meeting that had been scheduled to address ongoing concerns about safety and respect. As residents gathered, the tension in the room was palpable, with Karen seated prominently in the front. Marcus took a deep breath, ready to present the message of unity he had prepared. He wanted to emphasize the importance of working together for the betterment of their community, but he could feel Karen's eyes boring into him. As he began to speak, Karen interjected, her voice loud and cutting. "Isn't it funny how you think your little speeches will change anything? You're wasting everyone's time, Marcus." He felt the anger rise within him, but he fought to keep his tone steady. "This isn't about me. It's about all of us coming together to create a safe and supportive environment." "Safe for whom?" she shot back. "Your kind? You think just because you smile and preach about acceptance, we're all supposed to fall in line?" The room buzzed with discomfort as murmurs of dissent rippled through the audience. Marcus clenched his fists, feeling the pressure of the moment. "This isn't about my kind. This is about all of us. We need to focus on building a community where everyone feels welcome and respected." Karen stood up, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Why don't you just admit that you're here to take over? You think you can just come into our lives and dictate how we should feel about it?" The tension reached a boiling point, and Marcus finally snapped. "I'm not taking over anything. I'm here to stand against discrimination and to fight for what's right." Karen's laughter rang through the room, a cruel reminder of how far apart they were. "You're fighting for nothing but your own ego, Marcus. You'll never win here." The meeting ended in chaos, with many residents leaving in anger or confusion. Marcus felt drained, the emotional weight of Karen's hostility weighing heavily on him. It was clear that her entitlement and blatant rudeness were not just personal attacks. They represented a deeper issue in the community. Despite the pain of her words, Marcus vowed not to give in to her hostility. He would continue to fight for a better future for his family and for everyone in the neighborhood. The struggle was far from over, but he knew that standing up to Karen's escalating behavior was just the beginning of a much larger battle for equality and respect. As he returned home that night, he reflected on the challenges ahead. The fire within him burned brighter, fueled by the injustices he had faced and the determination to change things for the better. He wouldn't back down, no matter how hard Karen tried to push him away. In the heart of adversity, he found strength, ready to face whatever came next. As Marcus walked away from the chaos of the community meeting, his heart raced with a mix of frustration and determination. The room had erupted into arguments, a cacophony of voices drowning out any hope for a constructive dialogue. He felt the weight of Karen's words pressing down on him, each jab a reminder of the intolerance and prejudice that lingered beneath the surface of their community. Sinking into the worn leather couch at home, Marcus ran his hands through his hair. He had tried so hard to engage with Karen respectfully, to show her that he was not her enemy. But no matter how much he extended the olive branch, it always seemed to be met with disdain and hostility. Why does she have to be like that? He muttered to himself, feeling the anger bubble within him. It wasn't just about him, it was about his family, his children, and the future he envisioned for them in this community. He closed his eyes, taking a deep breath to center himself. I can't let her get to me, he reminded himself. I have to stay calm. I owe it to my family to handle this with grace. It was a mantra he repeated in moments of strife, a reminder that losing his cool would not help anyone. It was easy to feel overwhelmed by emotions in such situations, but he had learned the hard way that reacting impulsively would only make matters worse. As he stared out the window at the fading sunlight, Marcus reflected on how challenging it was to remain composed in the face of such blatant racism. It felt like walking a tightrope, balancing his frustrations with the need to be a role model for his children. He thought about Maya and how her innocence was often shattered by the harsh realities of the world. I need to show her strength, not just in how I respond to others, but in how I respond to myself, he mused. His mind drifted to their last family dinner, where they had shared stories of resilience and hope. He had recounted how his own parents had faced discrimination but had taught him to rise above it. You can't let others define who you are, he had told Maya, his voice filled with conviction. But now, the weight of his own words pressed heavily on his conscience. Am I living up to that ideal? He questioned silently. Marcus closed his eyes again, inhaling deeply. I'm not just fighting for myself, I'm fighting for my children's future. It was a reminder that every encounter with Karen, every hateful word, was a moment of growth for him and an opportunity to instill strength in his family. He thought about the self-talk strategies he had developed over the years. When confronted with anger and prejudice, he reminded himself that his patience was not a sign of weakness but a powerful tool. Patience is strength, he whispered to himself, recalling the many times he had successfully navigated tough situations. He imagined himself as a dam holding back a river, preventing the flood of emotions from sweeping him away. I have to channel my anger into something constructive, he told himself. Marcus also understood that it was crucial to detach his sense of self-worth from Karen's opinions. Her view of me doesn't define who I am. I know my value. I know my family's value. He thought of all the good they brought to the neighborhood, the initiatives they organized, the connections they built, the kindness they extended to everyone. I can't let one person's hatred overshadow the positive impact we're making. As he processed these feelings, he felt the familiar urge to confront Karen and call her out on her behavior. But he knew that acting on that impulse would only fuel the fire and reinforce her preconceived notions. Reacting won't change her mind, he reasoned. I need to show her that I'm not intimidated, that I'm here to stay, not because I have to prove anything to her, but because this is my home too. Marcus's thoughts turned to his children again. Maya had been so excited about the family day, eager to meet new friends and participate in activities. What message am I sending her if I let my anger take over? He pondered. He envisioned her face, bright and eager, full of hope for a world where everyone got along. I want her to see strength in compassion, not in confrontation. He recalled the lessons he had learned from his parents about handling conflict with dignity. They had faced their share of challenges, yet they had always emphasized the importance of rising above negativity. You catch more flies with honey than vinegar, his mother used to say, her words echoing in his mind. Show them kindness, and they'll have no choice but to respect you. With renewed determination, Marcus resolved to practice patience, to respond to Karen's hostility with grace. I'll show her that love and kindness can break down barriers, he thought, envisioning a future where understanding prevailed. I will be the calm in the storm. Days turned into weeks, and the tension with Karen showed no signs of easing. Still, Marcus held on to his resolve. Whenever he encountered her, he focused on maintaining a composed demeanor, forcing a smile even when it felt like a monumental task. One day she'll see, he reassured himself, even when doubt crept in. Each time he met Karen's hostility with calmness, he felt a small victory within himself. It became a practice, each interaction a test of his patience, an opportunity to demonstrate resilience. Even as the anger simmered beneath the surface, he found that remaining composed allowed him to maintain control of the situation. During one particularly tense encounter at a local event, Karen had again berated him publicly, insisting that he didn't belong there. Instead of responding with anger, Marcus took a deep breath, looked her in the eyes, and calmly replied, "I'm here to be part of this community, just like you. We all have a place here." The crowd around them seemed to shift, a collective tension releasing as they witnessed his poise in the face of adversity. For a moment, Marcus felt a surge of empowerment wash over him. Maybe, just maybe, my patience will pave the way for change, he thought. In the days that followed, Marcus continued to practice patience, using self-reflection as a guide. He would sit in quiet moments, reminding himself of his purpose and the love he had for his family. This isn't just about standing up to Karen, it's about creating a better environment for all of us. Each morning became a new opportunity to reinforce his commitment to remain calm and composed. He would wake up early, before the rest of the family, and meditate on the challenges ahead. I am strong. I am resilient. I am part of a community that deserves respect. He repeated these affirmations until they became a part of his daily routine. He also started involving his family in discussions about the challenges they faced, fostering an open dialogue where Maya and Tanya could express their thoughts and feelings. "We need to stick together," he would say, emphasizing the importance of unity in the face of adversity. They would brainstorm ways to engage with their neighbors positively, always keeping the focus on kindness and respect. As Marcus navigated the complexities of dealing with Karen, he found himself becoming more resilient, each encounter a stepping stone toward greater strength. It wasn't just about the conflict with her, it was about embracing the broader challenge of fostering understanding within a community rife with division. He understood that his patience was a form of activism, a way to show others that change was possible through peaceful means. "I won't let hatred define my response," he vowed, knowing that every respectful engagement brought him closer to his goal of building a harmonious community. In those quiet moments of reflection, Marcus found hope. He realized that his patience was not just a personal victory, it was a gift he could share with his family and community. With every struggle, he felt himself growing stronger, more determined to embody the values he cherished. As the sun set over the horizon, casting a warm glow across the neighborhood, Marcus sat with his family, sharing laughter and stories. He felt a sense of peace wash over him, knowing that, despite the challenges ahead, he was prepared to face them with grace and resilience. He would not let Karen's hostility dictate his actions or his sense of belonging. Instead, he would rise above, embracing the strength within him to foster the community he envisioned for his family, a place where love, respect, and understanding could thrive. As the sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden hue over the suburban street, Marcus stood on his porch, watching the delivery van pull into the driveway. He had hoped for a peaceful exchange with Karen, the delivery driver, but he could sense that the tension between them had reached a boiling point. He could see her through the window, her body tense and rigid as she shifted in her seat, preparing herself for yet another interaction. When Karen finally emerged from the van, her demeanor was markedly different. No longer merely curt, she exuded an air of aggression. Marcus felt a knot form in his stomach as she approached, her steps purposeful and defiant. There was a flash of determination in her eyes that sent a clear message. She was not there to simply deliver a package. She was ready for a confrontation. "Is there a problem?" Marcus asked, trying to keep his tone neutral, hoping to defuse the situation before it escalated further. But instead of answering, Karen stepped onto the porch, invading his personal space. The closeness made Marcus uneasy. He could feel the tension crackling between them like electricity in the air. "Yeah, there is," she snapped, her voice dripping with disdain. "You shouldn't even be here. People like you don't belong in this neighborhood." Her words hung in the air, thick with prejudice, and Marcus felt the heat rise in his cheeks. He forced himself to maintain eye contact, refusing to back down or show any sign of intimidation. Without warning, Karen took a step closer, her body nearly touching his. It was an aggressive move meant to unnerve him. "This package," she said, pointing at the box in her hand, isn't for people like you. With that, she shoved the package back into the van, making a point of ignoring Marcus as she did so. "Excuse me?" Marcus replied, his voice steady but with an edge of incredulity. "What do you mean, people like me?" He couldn't believe she had the audacity to say such a thing, especially in front of his home, where his family could hear everything. Karen looked at him, her expression a mixture of amusement and contempt. "You know exactly what I mean," she said, her tone mocking. "You don't belong here. This is a nice neighborhood, and we don't want your kind messing it up." Her words cut deeper than Marcus expected, the venom in her voice stinging like a slap. Marcus's heart raced, and he felt a surge of anger rising within him. The injustice of her words was infuriating. "I have just as much right to be here as you do," he countered, his voice rising slightly in defiance. He took a step back, trying to create some distance, but Karen stepped forward again, refusing to let him retreat. "Why don't you just go back where you came from?" she spat, her words laced with hostility. "You're just a nuisance, taking up space in a neighborhood that doesn't want you." Her brazen attitude shocked him. This wasn't just an argument over a package anymore. It was a confrontation that embodied the very prejudice he had tried to rise above. "I'm not going anywhere," Marcus declared, grounding himself in his right to exist peacefully in his own home. "You need to learn that your outdated views don't hold power here." Karen's face contorted with rage, and she took another menacing step toward him, clearly unwilling to back down. "You think you can just stand here and talk back to me? You think you can intimidate me?" she taunted, her eyes flashing with hostility. In that moment, Karen's true nature was laid bare. "You think just because you've moved into this neighborhood, you're entitled to anything? You're nothing but a burden." She leaned in closer, invading his personal space even more. "Your kind brings nothing but trouble," she added, her voice dripping with scorn. The racial undertones in her comments struck Marcus like a physical blow. "What you're saying is wrong, and you know it," he replied, his voice low but firm. "People like me contribute to this community. We are your neighbors, your friends, your children's friends." But Karen seemed unfazed by his attempts to reason with her. Instead, she straightened up and looked down her nose at him, a self-satisfied smirk plastered on her face. "Why don't you do everyone a favor and just stay in your lane?" she sneered, a final jab meant to belittle him. Marcus felt a mixture of rage and sadness washing over him. How could someone be so blind to their own hatred? He glanced toward the door, where his family was likely watching, their expressions surely mirroring his shock and disbelief. He didn't want them to witness this ugliness, but he also felt a deep sense of responsibility to stand his ground. "Look," he said, trying to regain his composure. "I'm not here to argue with you. I just want my package, and I want you to understand that you're not going to intimidate me." The determination in his voice surprised even him. He felt the courage swell within him, fueled by the love he had for his family. But Karen wasn't finished. "You think your little speech is going to change my mind? I've seen people like you come and go, and I know you'll never fit in here," she shot back, her voice rising. The arrogance in her words made it clear that she felt untouchable, protected by her privilege. As the confrontation escalated, Marcus realized that words alone would not change Karen's mind. He had hoped to appeal to her sense of reason, to show her that they were all human beings deserving of respect. But it was evident that her biases ran too deep. With each of her insults, the distance between them felt wider than ever. "Why are you so afraid of me?" he asked, genuinely curious. "I'm not a threat to you or this neighborhood. I'm just trying to live my life like everyone else." His voice held a mix of frustration and sadness, wanting her to see that her fear was unfounded. Karen's response was swift and sharp. "Afraid? Please, that I'm not afraid of anything. I just don't want people like you ruining everything." She crossed her arms defiantly, a clear barrier between them, refusing to even acknowledge the humanity he tried to convey. The tension hung thick in the air, a suffocating reminder of the battle of wills they were engaged in. Marcus stood firm, unwilling to back down despite the emotional toll it was taking on him. He could feel the eyes of his family watching from inside, and he realized that this confrontation was about more than just him. It was about setting an example for them. After what felt like an eternity, Marcus finally took a deep breath and stepped back, lowering his voice. "I'm not going to fight you, Karen. I'll let this go for now, but I want you to think about what you've said and how it affects people. This isn't just about you or me, it's about our entire community." With that, he turned and walked back toward the house, his heart pounding in his chest. He felt a mix of relief and defeat, knowing that while he had stood his ground, the battle against Karen's prejudices was far from over. As he reached the door, he paused for a moment, glancing back at her. Karen stood there, her face twisted in frustration, clearly caught off guard by his refusal to engage further. For a fleeting moment, he hoped that she might reconsider her views, but deep down, he knew that change would take time, if it ever came at all. Marcus felt a surge of determination course through him as he stood there facing Karen. Instead of letting her hostility provoke him into anger or a physical confrontation, he made a conscious choice to respond differently. Slowly, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, the sleek device feeling solid in his hand. The decision to record this moment was a calculated one. He wanted evidence of her behavior, a way to document the prejudice he had encountered firsthand. "Karen," he said, holding the phone up, "I think it's important to capture this interaction. Your words and actions reflect who you truly are." He focused the camera on her, aiming to capture the emotion on her face. The sudden shift caught Karen off guard. Her bravado faltered for a moment as she realized she was being recorded. "What are you doing?" she barked, her confidence slipping. There was a noticeable tremor in her voice, betraying her discomfort. "You can't record me without my permission." Marcus felt a sense of power surge within him, fueled by the realization that he was no longer a passive recipient of her aggression. "Actually, I can," he replied calmly. "We're in a public space, and I have the right to document this." As he spoke, he maintained a steady gaze on her, trying to convey the strength of his resolve without raising his voice. He wanted to show that he wouldn't be intimidated, not now and not ever. Karen's discomfort was palpable. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, her eyes darting around as if searching for an escape route. "This is ridiculous," she muttered, her earlier bravado dissolving into uncertainty. "You're making a big deal out of nothing." "No, Karen," Marcus countered, his tone firm but measured. "This isn't nothing. Your behavior is unacceptable, and it needs to be addressed." He continued recording, capturing every moment, every change in her expression. He was determined to show the world the reality of what he faced. As he filmed, he felt a sense of clarity wash over him. In that moment, he was not just protecting himself. He was also standing up for anyone who had ever been subjected to racism or prejudice. His calm demeanor contrasted sharply with Karen's escalating frustration. Her cheeks flushed, and her fists clenched at her sides, betraying her inability to regain control of the situation. "Stop recording me," she shouted, her voice rising in pitch. "You think this makes you look good? It just makes you look pathetic." But Marcus remained composed, focusing the lens on her. "You can call me whatever you want, but I won't allow you to demean me or my family." The words flowed with a confidence that surprised him. He felt the weight of his ancestors behind him, urging him to stand tall. With each passing moment, Karen's facade crumbled further. "You don't know anything about me," she snapped, her frustration bubbling over. "You're just playing the victim because you think it'll make you look good." Marcus shook his head, unfazed by her attempts to deflect. "This isn't about playing victim. This is about standing up for what's right. It's about calling out discrimination when I see it." He felt a wave of empowerment. His calm response was the ultimate act of defiance against her hostility. The more he recorded, the more Karen's anger intensified. She tried to swipe at the phone, her movements erratic and desperate, but Marcus sidestepped her attempts, maintaining a respectful distance. "You can't just ignore your own behavior, Karen," he said, keeping his voice steady. "The world needs to see how people like you treat others." "People like me?" she echoed, her eyes narrowing in disbelief. "What do you mean by that?" He paused, considering her question. "I mean people who think they can belittle others based on race or background. You believe you have some sort of superiority here, and it's time someone called you out on it." In that moment, Karen's bravado evaporated. Her earlier insults fell flat, and she was left grasping for justification. She crossed her arms defensively, her body language betraying her insecurity. The confidence she had exhibited moments ago was replaced by a realization that she was losing control of the narrative. Marcus felt a mixture of relief and satisfaction. By choosing to record her, he had turned the tide of the confrontation. Instead of being the target of her aggression, he had transformed the situation into one where he held the power. It was liberating. "Why don't you just leave me alone?" she finally asked, her voice lower now, laced with uncertainty. "Why do you have to make this such a big deal?" "Because it is a big deal, Karen," Marcus replied, his tone softening just a fraction. "It's a big deal for everyone who has ever faced discrimination, for everyone who has been made to feel like they don't belong. I won't let you demean me or anyone else." The sincerity in his voice seemed to penetrate her defenses. For a brief moment, Marcus saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes, a crack in her armor. Perhaps she was beginning to understand that her words carried weight, that her behavior had consequences beyond this single encounter. "Fine," she huffed, her defiance wavering. "You can record all you want, but it doesn't change who I am." "No, it doesn't," Marcus agreed, "but it might help you reflect on who you choose to be. I hope you consider that." He felt a sense of closure wash over him as he continued to film, capturing her struggle to reconcile her actions with the reality that was unfolding. As he finished recording, Marcus lowered his phone and looked her in the eye. "I hope you think about what happened here today, Karen. I hope you take a moment to reflect on how you treat others." He felt a sense of pride for standing up for himself, a quiet strength that resonated deeply within him. Turning away, he walked back toward his house, leaving Karen to grapple with the reality of her actions. In that moment, he felt a wave of empowerment, knowing that he had chosen a path of dignity and respect. He had faced hostility with composure and had taken control of a situation that could have spiraled out of control. As he stepped inside, the warmth of his home enveloped him, and he felt grateful for the support of his family. He knew he had set an example for them, demonstrating the power of calmness in the face of adversity. That was a lesson that would resonate long after this encounter faded into memory. The following morning, Marcus woke up to the sound of his phone buzzing incessantly on the bedside table. As he reached for it, he was met with a flood of notifications. Messages from friends, family, and even strangers filled his screen, all eager to share their thoughts on the video he had posted the day before. Curiosity piqued, he unlocked his phone and was instantly greeted by the sight of his video racking up views at an astonishing rate. As he scrolled through the comments, a wave of emotion washed over him. Each new message echoed with empathy and support, and it was clear that the video was resonating with many people. Comments like, "Thank you for standing up for yourself," and "I can't believe how calmly you handled that situation," filled the feed, providing a sense of community he hadn't expected. Marcus felt his heart swell with gratitude. The support was overwhelming. Viewers shared their own experiences with racism, recounting moments when they, too, had faced discrimination or prejudice. "I've been there," one comment read. "It's so important that we speak out against this behavior." Each shared story reinforced the message that Marcus had hoped to convey, that this was not just an isolated incident but part of a broader social issue that needed to be addressed. With every notification, he felt more empowered. He quickly realized that his decision to record the encounter had sparked an important conversation online. People were not only condemning Karen's actions but also discussing the systemic racism that existed within their communities. The comments reflected a shared understanding that the fight against discrimination was ongoing and that they needed to unite to combat it. "Let's keep this conversation going," another comment suggested. "We need to hold people accountable for their words and actions." This statement resonated deeply with Marcus, who had always believed in the power of collective action. He felt a sense of responsibility to amplify these voices, to keep the discussion alive beyond just the video. As the day progressed, the video's views skyrocketed into the thousands, then tens of thousands. Each update sent ripples of excitement through him. It became clear that this was more than just a moment. It was becoming a movement. News outlets began picking up the story, and interviews with social media influencers flooded in. Marcus was contacted by journalists eager to learn more about his experience, and he found himself in a whirlwind of interviews, each one amplifying the reach of his message. In the midst of all this attention, Marcus made a point to read through the responses on the video carefully. It wasn't just the support that struck him, but also the stories of pain and resilience shared by others. He read about people who had been made to feel unwelcome in their own neighborhoods, who had experienced the same type of hostility Karen displayed. Each story added a layer of depth to the conversation and made him realize the collective struggle that so many were facing. He was especially moved by a comment from a young woman who shared how she had faced similar discrimination while working as a delivery driver. "I once had someone refuse to accept their order from me because of my skin color," she wrote. "It's heartbreaking to see how common this is." The vulnerability in her words inspired him. It was a reminder that while his experience was painful, it was not unique. As the video continued to gain traction, Marcus felt a growing sense of duty. He knew he had a platform now, and he wanted to use it to advocate for change. He began sharing educational resources on his social media accounts, promoting organizations that focused on racial justice and equality. He felt that it was his responsibility to contribute to the dialogue in a meaningful way. The following days were a blur of activity. Marcus was invited to speak on podcasts and join panels discussing racism and the importance of addressing these issues head-on. With each opportunity, he aimed to share not only his story but also the stories of others who had experienced similar discrimination. It was important to him that he used his newfound visibility to foster awareness and understanding. As he continued to engage with his growing audience, he emphasized the need for action. "It's not enough to just support one another online," he wrote in a follow-up post. "We must take this conversation into our communities, advocate for policy changes, and support organizations working to dismantle systemic racism." Marcus's message resonated with many, and he began to see a shift in the conversations around him. More people were willing to engage in discussions about race and discrimination, and he felt a renewed sense of hope that change was possible. Throughout this journey, Marcus had come to understand the power of social media. While it could serve as a platform for hate, it also had the potential to create solidarity and foster understanding. The video that had begun as a personal act of defiance had transformed into a catalyst for change, sparking discussions that were long overdue. He knew the road ahead would be challenging, but he felt ready to face it. With the support of countless viewers behind him, Marcus felt a sense of purpose, a mission to advocate for justice, raise awareness, and fight for a future where everyone could feel safe and accepted, regardless of their skin color. Karen sat in her dimly lit living room, the silence hanging heavily in the air. The television flickered softly in the background, its noise muted, but she hardly registered it. Her phone buzzed incessantly on the coffee table, notifications flooding in from every social media platform. Each vibration sent a fresh wave of anxiety through her. Just days ago, she had been cruising through her daily routine, a delivery driver with little regard for the world around her, but now, her life had been turned upside down. The moment she opened her phone, the reality of the situation crashed over her like a tidal wave. Headlines flashed across her screen. Delivery drivers' racist remarks go viral, and community rallies against racism after disturbing encounter. With every scroll, Karen's heart sank deeper into her stomach. The video Marcus had recorded had not only gone viral, but it had also sparked outrage that rippled through social media and beyond. She could hardly comprehend the gravity of what she had done. The once familiar faces of her friends and neighbors were replaced by strangers who now recognized her as the woman who had treated a black family with contempt. Comments on the video ranged from sympathetic to downright furious. "She should be ashamed," one user wrote. "This kind of behavior has no place in our society." The backlash was relentless, and Karen felt the weight of her actions suffocating her. Her employer, a small delivery company, had caught wind of the viral video within hours of its release. They were inundated with calls and emails from concerned customers and community members demanding accountability. The owner of the company had no choice but to act quickly. As Karen sat in her living room, scrolling through her notifications, her phone rang. It was her boss. "Karen," he said, his voice clipped and strained, "we need to talk." The words sent a chill down her spine. "What about?" she replied, her voice shaking. "I've been getting calls all day about the incident," he said, each word a heavy blow. "I'm afraid we can't keep you on after this." It's not just about the company's reputation, it's about what you did. No, please, Karen begged, her heart racing. I made a mistake. I didn't mean it. You have to understand. But her boss's tone was unwavering. You need to understand that this isn't just a mistake, Karen. This is serious. People are outraged. We can't have someone representing our company who behaves like this. Karen felt the ground beneath her feet shift. But I've been with the company for years. I've always done my job well, she cried, desperation creeping into her voice. Not anymore, he replied bluntly. We'll be sending you your final paycheck. I hope you take some time to reflect on what happened. The call ended abruptly, leaving her reeling. She tossed her phone onto the couch, her breath coming in quick, shallow gasps. The reality of her situation hit her hard. She was jobless, publicly shamed, and faced with the undeniable truth that her actions had consequences. As the weight of her choices settled in, tears began to fall. She thought back to that day, to Marcus and his family. Why had she acted that way? It was as if a fog had clouded her judgment, blinding her to the humanity in front of her. Her entitlement had driven her to treat another person as less than, and now she was paying the price. The realization of the pain she had caused settled heavily on her chest. As the day wore on, the isolation grew unbearable. Friends who had once laughed with her now avoided her gaze, their discomfort palpable. The text messages that had once filled her phone with laughter and jokes had dwindled to silence. She felt as though she was living in a nightmare, trapped by her own actions. She turned to her social media accounts, hoping to find some solace or support, but all she saw were the angry comments and harsh judgments directed at her. Each notification felt like another stab to her already wounded pride. This woman doesn't deserve forgiveness, one comment read. She needs to learn a lesson. The sentiment echoed in her mind, the words ringing true. She had crossed a line, and the world was not going to let her forget it. That evening, as she scrolled through the video again, a wave of remorse washed over her. Watching herself in that moment of anger, she felt ashamed. She remembered the look on Marcus's face, the confusion and hurt she had inflicted upon him and his family. She had acted out of fear and prejudice, projecting her insecurities onto someone who had simply been trying to receive a package. In her mind, she replayed the confrontation, each moment etched in vivid detail, leaving her filled with regret. As the hours passed, she struggled to come to terms with her actions. Karen was forced to confront the ugly truth that her behavior reflected deep-seated biases she had never acknowledged. The self-righteousness that had once fueled her arrogance began to dissolve, leaving behind a hollow shell of shame. It became clear to her that she had a choice to make, to wallow in her despair or to learn and grow from this experience. In the following days, the backlash only intensified. News outlets continued to run stories about the incident, and her name became synonymous with racism in the community. As she faced the fallout, Karen knew she had to take responsibility for her actions, even if it meant publicly acknowledging her mistakes. She decided to post an apology on her social media accounts. It was a difficult choice, but she felt it was necessary to address the hurt she had caused. I want to sincerely apologize to Marcus and his family, she wrote, her fingers trembling over the keyboard. What I said and did was unacceptable, and I take full responsibility. I am ashamed of my behavior, and I recognize that I need to change. Hitting send was one of the hardest things she had ever done, but it felt like a small step towards accountability. The responses were mixed. Some praised her for owning up to her mistakes, while others condemned her for her past actions, insisting that it was too little, too late. The backlash she had feared continued, but she realized that she had to endure it if she truly wanted to make amends. With each passing day, the impact of her actions weighed heavier on her. She began to explore resources that addressed racism and bias, determined to understand the roots of her behavior. It was a difficult journey, filled with discomfort and self-reflection. She attended workshops, read books, and engaged in conversations that challenged her preconceived notions. In her heart, Karen felt a flicker of hope that change was possible. While she had initially wanted to ignore her past, she began to see the value in facing it head-on. The path to redemption would be long, but she was willing to do the work. The video had sparked a fire within her, a desire to not only apologize but to actively educate herself and others. She knew she could no longer remain complacent, allowing her biases to dictate her actions. It was time to take a stand, not just for herself, but for the community that had been affected by her ignorance. As she reflected on her journey, Karen realized that true change began with acknowledgement and understanding. The road ahead was uncertain, but she was determined to learn, to grow, and to become a better person. The lessons she had learned from Marcus and his family would stay with her, shaping her future interactions and inspiring her to challenge her own biases. Ultimately, she hoped to transform her shame into action, using her experience to advocate for others who faced similar prejudices. While the journey would be challenging, she understood that it was necessary, both for her own growth and for the collective healing of the community she had wronged. Marcus sat on the porch of his home, the evening sun casting a warm glow over the neighborhood. The events of the past few days replayed in his mind like a loop, and he found solace in the familiar surroundings. As he watched his family inside, laughing and enjoying each other's company, he couldn't help but reflect on the chaos that had unfolded. The video he had recorded had gone viral, reaching far beyond their suburban community. With each view and share, he had felt a mixture of pride and apprehension. It was empowering to see people rallying around his experience, but he also worried about the attention it brought. He never wanted to be at the center of a controversy. He simply wanted to stand up for himself and his family. The overwhelming support from friends, neighbors, and even strangers had been heartwarming. Messages flooded in from all corners of the internet, praising him for his calm demeanor and encouraging him to keep speaking out against racism. It was a strange feeling to receive recognition for something that should never have happened in the first place. While he appreciated the validation, he knew that this was not about him. It was about the broader issues of discrimination and bias that continued to plague society. As he sipped his iced tea, Marcus thought about Karen, the delivery driver who had crossed a line. He felt a mix of empathy and anger toward her. He understood that her behavior stemmed from a place of ignorance, shaped by her own experiences and biases. He recognized that people often acted out of fear, and it was easy to project insecurities onto others. While he didn't condone her actions, he hoped that her experience would lead to personal growth. The outpouring of support had been a reminder of the power of community. His neighbors had rallied around his family, organizing a gathering to discuss how they could come together to promote inclusivity and understanding. It was a powerful moment, as people from various backgrounds shared their experiences, finding common ground in their struggles. It reminded Marcus that they were stronger together, united in their commitment to create a more equitable environment for everyone. In that gathering, Marcus had the chance to share his thoughts. He spoke passionately about the importance of dignity and respect, emphasizing that every individual deserved to be treated with kindness, regardless of their background. "We need to uplift one another," he had said, looking into the faces of those gathered. "Our strength lies in our unity, in our ability to empathize and support one another through the challenges we face." The conversations that followed were enlightening. Neighbors who had previously been strangers began to connect, sharing their own stories of prejudice and resilience. It was a powerful reminder that while they came from different walks of life, their experiences were often intertwined. They were all fighting for a common cause: the pursuit of justice, equality, and mutual respect. As Marcus reflected on the encounter with Karen, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. He had faced adversity and emerged with a clearer understanding of the impact one person could have. He had chosen to respond to hostility with dignity and grace, and in doing so, he had sparked a larger conversation about racism and its consequences. The online support had also brought attention to the need for education and dialogue surrounding race relations. Marcus realized that while his family's experience was significant, it was part of a larger narrative. The conversations needed to extend beyond social media, reaching into schools, workplaces, and communities where ignorance often thrived. He thought about the importance of teaching future generations about empathy and understanding. Children needed to learn that differences should be celebrated, not feared. By fostering open discussions about race and bias, they could build a more inclusive society. Marcus felt compelled to become an advocate for this change, to share his story and encourage others to do the same. With a deep breath, he gazed out at the sunset, feeling a sense of peace wash over him. The struggles he and his family faced had not been in vain. They had ignited a movement that could lead to meaningful change. The road ahead would undoubtedly be filled with challenges, but he was ready to face them head-on. The experience had taught him the value of resilience. It had shown him that standing up against injustice was not just an individual act, but a collective responsibility. He felt a sense of pride in his family and their ability to navigate such a difficult situation with dignity. They had emerged stronger, more united, and ready to confront the world together. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Marcus made a silent vow to himself and his family. They would continue to advocate for equality and justice, to lift others up and support those in need. Their journey would not end with this incident. It was only the beginning of a much larger mission. Together, they would work toward a future where every individual was treated with the respect and dignity they deserved, where community and unity triumphed over hate and division. In that moment, surrounded by the warmth of his family and the embrace of a supportive community, Marcus felt hope. Hope that change was possible, that hearts and minds could be opened, and that together, they could build a better world. The lessons learned would remain with him, shaping his path forward and guiding his efforts to create a society where kindness and understanding reign supreme. Did this story resonate with you? It's a powerful reminder that our choices define us, and standing up for what's right can make a difference. If you believe in the power of community, resilience, and the importance of treating everyone with dignity, share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that highlight courage and change. Together, let's keep the conversation going and inspire each other to create a more inclusive world.